You look at the modern world, the exhausting corporate ladders, the transactional dating markets, the endless treadmill of debt and consumerism, and a quiet thought echoes in your mind. I don't want any of this. You watch people claw over each other for promotions that buy them fancier cages. You watch grown men destroy their health, their peace, and their dignity, chasing approval from a system that will replace them by Friday. And something deep inside you, something you have been taught to suppress, whispers a forbidden truth. I don't want to play this game anymore. You are tired, not the tired that sleep fixes, but the existential exhaustion of a man who has seen through the performance and can no longer pretend it matters. And that feeling, that profound desire to stop trying, is the very thing they are desperate to shame out of you. Society calls you lazy, lost, checked out, or broken for stepping back. But understand this with absolute clarity. That is not a diagnosis. That is a calculated shaming tactic. It is a weapon of dark psychology deployed against you by a system built on the foundation of your desperate, exhausted participation. They need you climbing, they need you competing, they need you caring, because the moment you stop caring, they lose all leverage over your life. The moment you withdraw your energy, your labor, your desperate attention, the entire machine begins to stutter, and that terrifies them more than any protest, any revolution, any political movement ever could. You did not arrive at this video by accident. If you feel a profound desire to walk away from the noise, do not let them shame you back into the cage. Do not let them convince you that your clarity is a disease. Today, using the forbidden philosophies of Machiavelli and Nietzsche, we will dismantle the greatest lie you were ever told about ambition, success, and what it truly means to be a man in a system designed to farm your life force until there is nothing left. Nietzsche wrote those words over a century ago, and the tribe has only grown louder, more invasive, more desperate to reclaim the men who dare to think for themselves. The matrix of modern systemic manipulation does not operate through visible chains. It operates through invisible expectations, through the dark psychology of shame, comparison, and manufactured desire. You were programmed from birth to believe that your worth as a man is measured exclusively by what you produce, what you earn, and what you provide for others. You were taught that rest is laziness, that solitude is failure, that a man who does not grind himself to dust is somehow defective. And every institution around you, from the education system that trained you to obey, to the corporate world that harvests your prime years, to the dating market that prices your value by your utility, reinforces this programming with surgical precision. But here is the forbidden question they never want you to ask. What if your lack of ambition to participate in modern society is not a sign of depression, but a sign of profound, terrifying clarity? What if the men who are quietly opting out, saving their money, guarding their peace, and refusing to chase the carrots dangled before them, what if those men are not broken at all? What if they are the only ones who are finally dangerously awake? Today, I am going to give you the complete psychological and strategic framework to understand exactly why your withdrawal is not weakness. It is the single most powerful act of dominance available to you in the 21st century. By the end of this video, you will possess the Machiavellian strategy of the opt-out, the ability to see the invisible system of control that has governed your entire life, the dark psychology behind every shaming tactic used to keep you compliant, and the precise tactical framework to walk away from the game forever. Not as a defeated man retreating, but as an ungovernable sovereign who has made the most strategically brilliant decision of his life. This is not motivation. This is not a pep talk. This is an initiation into the philosophy of Nietzsche, the strategy of Machiavelli, and the psychology of the men who are quietly terrifying every institution in the modern world simply by doing absolutely nothing. If these ideas resonate with you, hit that subscribe button for more top-tier content. Also, drop a "stop playing" in the comments so I know you're ready. Let's dive in. Let us begin with a truth so simple it is offensive that no one told you sooner. The system you were born into is a casino, and in a casino, the house always wins. That is not a metaphor. That is the operational blueprint of every major institution you have been funneled into since childhood. The education system does not exist to make you intelligent. It exists to make you employable, predictable, obedient, and formatted for extraction. You spent the first 2 decades of your life learning how to sit still, follow instructions, and measure your worth through grades assigned by authority figures. That was not education. That was compliance conditioning, and it is the foundation upon which every other form of systemic manipulation is built. You graduated into the corporate world believing that hard work and competence would be rewarded. You believed that if you showed up early, stayed late, and delivered results, you would ascend. And what happened? You watched less competent people with sharper elbows climb over you. You watched office politics determine outcomes that merit should have decided. You realized that the game was never about excellence. It was about performance. The performance of loyalty, of enthusiasm, of caring deeply about quarterly metrics that will be forgotten by next month. And the prize for winning this exhausting performance? A slightly larger cage, a slightly nicer title, the privilege of working even harder so that someone above you can take credit. If the prize for winning the rat race is just becoming the head rat, why are you running? But understanding that the corporate game is rigged is not enough. You need to understand that every single ladder you were told to climb, career, social status, relationships, operates on the same dark psychology principle. The system creates artificial scarcity of validation, then sells you your own approval at the cost of your time, health, and autonomy. Think about the modern dating market. You were told to be ambitious, successful, emotionally available, physically fit, mentally sharp, financially stable, and perpetually improving. You were told that all of this effort would eventually be rewarded with genuine connection. But what you discovered is a transactional marketplace where your value is measured by your utility to others, where your worth as a partner is calculated by what you provide, not who you are, where the goalposts move every time you approach them. This is not a system that wants you fulfilled. This is a system that needs you hungry, and the moment you stop being hungry, you become the most dangerous thing in their ecosystem, a man who cannot be controlled because he wants nothing they are selling. The male loneliness crisis they keep reporting on, the quiet quitting epidemic sweeping through corporations, the growing number of men who are simply walking away from the game, these are not symptoms of failure. These are symptoms of men waking up to a truth that Machiavelli articulated 5 centuries ago. When the game is designed for you to lose, the only winning move is to refuse to play. But they will never frame it that way. They will call you lazy. They will call you a loser. They will pathologize your clarity and medicate your rebellion. Because your participation is their profit, and your withdrawal is their existential crisis. I'm going to explain exactly why society is panicking over men like you. But first, you need to understand how deep this programming goes, and why breaking free requires more than just awareness. Every system of power throughout human history has operated on one fundamental principle: the extraction of energy from the many for the benefit of the few. The methodology evolves, the principle never changes. In feudal societies, the extraction was obvious: physical labor, crops, military service. In the industrial age, it was factory hours and human bodies fed into machines. But in the modern age, the extraction has become invisible, and that invisibility is precisely what makes it the most effective system of control ever devised. Today, you are not harvested for your labor alone. You are harvested for your attention, your emotional energy, your desire, your anxiety, your ambition, and your desperate need to feel like you matter in a world that has been engineered to make you feel perpetually insufficient. Social media is not a communication tool. It is an attention extraction machine. The algorithm does not show you what is good for you. It shows you what triggers the deepest emotional response: outrage, envy, inadequacy, desire, because your emotional reaction is the product being sold. You are not the customer, you are the commodity. Advertising does not sell you products. It sells you the feeling of deficiency. Every advertisement you have ever seen operates on the same dark psychology formula. Create a wound, then sell the bandage. You are not attractive enough, buy this. You are not successful enough, lease this. You are not interesting enough, subscribe to this. Your entire consumer identity has been manufactured by people who profit from your insecurity. And the career system? It does not sell you financial security. It sells you the illusion of future freedom at the cost of present slavery. Work hard now, they say. Sacrifice your youth, your health, your relationships, your peace of mind. And someday you will be free. But someday never arrives, because the system is designed to ensure that your expenses always expand to match your income, that your lifestyle inflation always outpaces your salary, and that you remain one missed paycheck away from panic, regardless of how much you earn. The elite use debt and desire as invisible chains. Cut the desire, and the chains evaporate. But here is the darkest part, the part they absolutely cannot allow you to see. The system does not just extract your energy, it recycles your exhaustion back into compliance. When you burn out, they do not offer you freedom. They offer you self-help. They offer you meditation apps and therapy sessions and wellness retreats, not to liberate you, but to restore you to functional productivity, to patch you up just enough so that you can return to the extraction machine on Monday morning. Your recovery is not their compassion, it is their maintenance protocol. You are not being healed. You are being repaired for further use. When you understand this, truly understand it at the level of your bones, something shifts inside you. The guilt you felt about not wanting to participate begins to dissolve. The shame you carried about your so-called lack of ambition starts to look like what it always was, an implanted emotion designed to keep you running on the wheel. You are not giving up. You are simply refusing to be farmed for your life force. And that distinction changes everything. Now that you understand the extraction mechanism, you need to understand the specific psychological tools used to keep you inside it. Machiavelli understood that power is not maintained through force alone. The most effective rulers maintain control through the management of hope and the strategic deployment of reward, not actual reward, but the promise of reward. The carrot is always more effective than the stick, because the stick creates resentment, but the carrot creates voluntary compliance. You chase it willingly, you exhaust yourself eagerly, and you blame yourself, not the system, when you fail to reach it. This is the Machiavellian architecture of the modern matrix, and it operates through three primary carrots. The first carrot is status. You were taught that status, your job title, your social position, your perceived success, determines your worth as a human being. But status is not a fixed resource. It is a manufactured hierarchy, and the people at the top of that hierarchy have a vested interest in keeping you obsessed with climbing, because your climbing is what holds the structure in place. The moment enough men stop caring about status, the entire hierarchy collapses. That is not a philosophical abstraction, that is a structural reality. The second carrot is romantic validation. This is perhaps the most powerful lever of control ever deployed against men. You were conditioned to believe that your value as a man is ultimately measured by your ability to attract, secure, and maintain a romantic partner. And that belief turns you into a perpetual self-improvement machine, not for your own benefit, but for the benefit of a marketplace that profits from your insecurity. You do not improve yourself because you are genuinely invested in growth. You improve yourself because you were taught that you are not enough as you are. And the dark psychology of that conditioning runs so deep that most men never question it. They simply keep performing, keep providing, keep proving, and call it love. The third carrot is legacy. You were told that a meaningful life requires leaving something behind. Children, wealth, accomplishments, a name that echoes after you are gone. But legacy is the ultimate long-term manipulation, because it chains your present happiness to an imagined future that you will never experience. You sacrifice today for a tomorrow that exists only as a concept. And the system benefits from every sacrifice you make, because every sacrifice is energy extracted from you and deposited into the machine. The most rebellious act in the 21st century is to sit quietly in a room and desire absolutely nothing. When you detach from the carrot of status, you stop climbing their ladder. When you detach from the carrot of romantic validation, you stop performing for an audience that was never satisfied. When you detach from the carrot of legacy, you reclaim the only thing that was ever truly yours, this moment, and in that reclamation, you become something the system has no strategy for, a man who cannot be motivated by their rewards because he has realized their rewards are worthless. If you express this withdrawal out loud, you will be attacked. The shaming machinery of society is designed to punish exactly this kind of clarity, but that is precisely why the next section is the most critical thing you will hear today. Because the opt-out is not a public declaration, it is a silent revolution, and silence is the one weapon they have no defense against. There is a reason the Sigma male psychology has captured the imagination of millions of men worldwide, and it has nothing to do with internet trends or meme culture. It resonates because it articulates something that men have always felt but were never given language for. The realization that the dominance hierarchy itself is the trap, and that true power exists only outside of it. Nietzsche philosophy recognized this when he wrote about the sovereign individual, the man who has liberated himself from the morality of the herd, not because he is immoral, but because he has evolved beyond the need for the tribe's approval to define his existence. This is the foundational mindset shift that separates the exhausted participant from the ungovernable sovereign. And it begins with one radical act of dark psychology turned inward, the total annihilation of your need to be perceived. You have spent your entire life managing perception. Every career decision, every social interaction, every relationship choice has been filtered through the question, what will they think of me? That question is not yours. It was installed in you by a system that controls you through the opinions of others. The moment you delete that question from your operating system, you become invisible to their manipulation. Not invisible as in weak, invisible as in untouchable. Machiavelli wrote extensively about the power of the prince who is feared versus the prince who is loved. But there is a third category that Machiavelli never fully explored because it was too dangerous to articulate in his time, the man who is neither feared nor loved because he is simply absent from the game entirely. The man who has withdrawn his attention, his ambition, his emotional investment, and his labor from the system. That man occupies a position of absolute strategic power. Because you cannot manipulate a man who wants nothing from you. You cannot threaten a man who has nothing you can take. You cannot shame a man who does not value your opinion. And you cannot control a man whose compliance you can no longer purchase with the carrots you have been dangling his entire life. This is the Sigma doctrine in its purest form. Not a personality type, not an internet archetype, a strategic position of total psychological sovereignty. And the dark psychology of it is devastatingly simple. Your apathy toward their fake status games is the highest form of intellectual superiority. They don't fear the man who protests the system. They fear the man who ignores it, because protest is still engagement. Protest is still energy directed at the machine. But silence, total, deliberate, weaponized silence, is a void that the system cannot fill, cannot fight, and cannot survive. You think opting out means living in poverty. You think walking away means losing everything. That is the final lie, and I am going to destroy that myth right now. Here is where the strategy becomes tactical. The opt-out is not about rejecting resources. It is about rejecting the system's terms for acquiring resources. It is about building an existence that operates entirely outside the extraction machine, what I call the ghost economy. The ghost economy is based on a Machiavellian principle that most people are too domesticated to implement. Minimize your needs, and you maximize your power. Every dollar you do not need to earn is an hour of freedom the system cannot extract from you. Every possession you do not need to own is a chain you have refused to wear. Every status symbol you do not need to display is a lever of control you have snapped in half. This is not minimalism as a lifestyle trend. This is strategic resource warfare. You are not living with less because it is aesthetically pleasing. You are living with less because every unit of need you eliminate is a unit of dependence you destroy. And dependence is the only currency the system accepts for your compliance. Start by calculating the true cost of everything you have been told you need, not the financial cost, the life cost. That apartment in the expensive city, how many hours of your irreplaceable life do you trade every month to maintain it? That car designed to signal status, how many years of your finite existence are chained to the payments? That lifestyle of restaurants, vacations, and consumer experiences curated for social media, how much of that is genuine desire and how much is programmed performance? Stop for a moment and calculate the energy you waste on maintaining an image that exists solely to satisfy the expectations of people who do not care about you. When you perform that calculation honestly, when you subtract the socially programmed desires from your genuine needs, you will discover something that the system desperately does not want you to know. Your actual needs are shockingly small. A man who has genuinely audited his real requirements, not his manufactured wants, but his actual biological, psychological necessities, discovers that the price of freedom is absurdly low. And when you reduce your overhead to that baseline, something extraordinary happens to the power dynamics of your entire life. You can walk away from any job because you do not need the salary they use as a leash. You can walk away from any relationship because you do not need the validation they use as a lever. You can walk away from any social obligation because you do not need the approval they use as currency. You become a ghost in the machine, present when you choose to be, absent when it serves you, and utterly impossible to coerce. This is the architecture of systemic freedom, and it is available to you right now, today, the moment you decide that your peace is worth more than their approval. But there is a critical danger at this stage. This is the exact moment the system will try to drag you back in. It will deploy every weapon in its arsenal: guilt, loneliness, fear, shame, the manufactured urgency of falling behind. You need to understand these counterattacks before they arrive, because if you are not prepared, they will work, and everything you have built will collapse. The system's response to your withdrawal will follow a predictable sequence. because systemic manipulation always follows the same playbook. First comes the shaming. You will be called lazy. You will be called a failure. You will be told you are wasting your potential. Friends, family, society at large, they will frame your strategic withdrawal as personal deficiency because that is the only interpretation that keeps the system's logic intact. If your opt-out is a rational, intelligent choice, then the system is the problem, and the system can never be the problem. So you must be the problem. Recognize this for what it is: dark psychology deployed to make you police yourself. The shame is not organic, it is manufactured, and it works because it hijacks a deeply wired human need, the need to belong to the tribe. Nietzsche warned about this a century ago. The tribe overwhelms the individual, not through force, but through the unbearable pressure of collective disapproval. But here is the tactical advantage your emotionally reactive competitors will never have. Once you understand that the shame is a weapon and not a truth, it loses all its power. You do not need to argue against it. You do not need to justify your choices. You simply observe it, categorize it as a manipulation tactic, and let it pass through you like wind through an open window. Second comes the isolation. They will pull back. Invitations will slow, calls will stop. The male loneliness crisis they report on so breathlessly is not a natural phenomenon. It is, in part, a punishment mechanism. The system isolates the non-compliant as a warning to others. This is what happens when you stop playing. But the isolation only works as a punishment if you still define your worth through social connection. If you have built an internal world rich enough to sustain you, if you have cultivated the sovereign mind that finds depth in solitude rather than deprivation, then their isolation becomes your sanctuary. Their punishment becomes your reward. Third, and this is the most dangerous stage, comes the re-seduction. After shaming fails and isolation fails, the system will try to lure you back with a customized carrot. A better job offer, a new romantic prospect, a sudden opportunity that seems tailor-made for your specific ambitions. This is not coincidence. This is the system recalibrating its strategy. It has identified your specific vulnerabilities and is deploying a targeted incentive to restore your compliance. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. The most dangerous gift is the one that comes precisely when you were about to walk away. The counter-strategy is simple, but demands absolute discipline. Before accepting any opportunity that arrives during your withdrawal, ask one question. Does this serve my sovereignty or does it restore my dependence? If the opportunity requires you to re-enter the extraction cycle, if it demands your time, your energy, your compliance in exchange for a reward you do not genuinely need, then it is not an opportunity. It is a trap wearing a pleasant mask. Reject it and watch how the power dynamics of your life invert completely. We are about to enter the final stage, becoming the ungovernable sovereign. Listen closely, because this is where everything changes. Everything you have absorbed up to this point, the understanding of the rigged game, the invisible harvest, the carrots of control, the Sigma doctrine, the ghost economy, and the counter-strike protocol, converges now into a single, unshakable identity. You are no longer a man who is opting out of the system. You are a man who has transcended the system entirely. The difference is not semantic. It is the difference between a prisoner who has escaped and a being who was never imprisoned in the first place. The ungovernable mindset is not a temporary state. It is a permanent reconfiguration of your psychological operating system. It is the moment you stop defining yourself in relation to the system at all, not as a participant, not as a rebel, not as a dropout, but as a sovereign entity whose existence is entirely self-referencing. You do not measure your worth by their metrics, because their metrics are irrelevant to you. You do not seek their validation, because their validation is a currency you no longer accept. You do not fear their punishment, because their punishment requires leverage they no longer possess. This is what Nietzsche meant by owning yourself. It is not a philosophical ideal, it is a tactical reality. And it is achieved not through dramatic action, but through the quiet, relentless subtraction of every external dependency until the only authority in your life is your own judgment. Stoicism teaches that the obstacle is the way, but the opt-out teaches something even more radical. The absence of the obstacle is the way. You do not overcome the system. You do not defeat the system. You simply withdraw your participation until the system becomes irrelevant to your existence. And in that irrelevance, you find something that no amount of career success, romantic validation, or social status could ever provide: peace. Not the fragile peace of a man who has temporarily satisfied his desires. The unshakable peace of a man who has permanently eliminated his manufactured needs. That is invincibility. Not the invincibility of a man who can withstand any attack, but the invincibility of a man who has removed himself from every battlefield. You cannot lose a game you are not playing. You cannot be defeated in a war you have left. And you cannot be controlled by a system you have made irrelevant. At the very end of this, I am going to give you the psychological shield that guarantees their shaming tactics never work on you again. But first, understand this: the sovereign does not announce himself. He does not argue. He does not explain. He simply lives by his own code, in his own space, on his own terms, and lets the confusion of those still trapped in the matrix be his silent confirmation that he has found the exit. Your energy is finite. Your years are numbered. Your attention is the most valuable resource in the modern economy, and every institution, every algorithm, every social expectation is designed to extract those resources from you until you have nothing left. The ungovernable sovereign looks at this extraction apparatus, calculates the return on investment, and makes the most rational decision available. He walks away, not with anger, not with bitterness, not with the dramatic gesture of a man who wants to be seen leaving. He walks away with the quiet certainty of a man who simply has better things to do with his existence than fuel someone else's machine. You have traveled from the exhausted participant to the awakened ghost, from the man who was told his reluctance was weakness to the man who now understands his reluctance was wisdom. From the compliant cog in an extraction machine to the ungovernable sovereign who has walked out of the casino, chips in hand, while everyone else is still at the table hoping the house will let them win. Everything you learned today, the rigged game, the invisible harvest, the carrots of control, the ghost economy, the counter-strike protocol, the sovereign identity, these are not theories. These are the operational principles of the most psychologically liberated men in the modern world. The men the system cannot touch. The men no headline can shame. The men no algorithm can manipulate. The men who have discovered the most terrifying truth in the dark psychology of modern power, that total non-participation is total dominance. You were not broken. You were not lazy. You were not depressed. You were seeing clearly in a world that punishes clarity. And now you have the framework to act on that clarity with the strategic precision of Machiavelli, the philosophical depth of Nietzsche, and the psychological invincibility of a man who has integrated his shadow and weaponized his silence. Here is the psychological shield I promised you. It is not a technique. It is not an affirmation. It is a single, unassailable truth that you will carry forward from this moment. You do not owe the world your participation. You do not owe anyone your ambition, your energy, your attention, or your compliance. You owe yourself the privilege of owning yourself, fully, completely, and without apology. The next time someone tells you that you are wasting your potential, that you need to get back in the game, that you are falling behind, look at them. Observe the exhaustion in their eyes. Notice the desperation beneath their advice. And understand that they are not trying to help you. They are trying to pull you back into the cage because your freedom makes their captivity unbearable. Smile, say nothing, and walk away. That silence is your sovereignty. That peace is your power. That refusal to engage is the most dominant act available to you in a world addicted to your reaction. If this spoke to a part of you that you have been told does not exist, the part that is done performing, done proving, done playing the game, drop the words "stop playing" in the comments, not as a message to me, as a declaration to yourself, as the moment you drew the line. This is the only place where we strip away the comfortable lies and hand you the dark psychology, the Machiavellian strategy, and the Nietzsche philosophy that the system prays you never discover. If you are ready to stop being governable, if you are ready to build the internal empire that no external force can touch, subscribe. Because what we are building here is not a channel. It is an alliance of sovereign minds. And the next video goes even deeper. And whatever you do, do not stop now. The video on your screen right now is not a suggestion. It is the next critical weapon in your arsenal, and it contains the one strategy that makes everything you learned today permanent. Trust me, you do not want to miss it. I will see you there. See what others miss, know what others fear. Become who others can't.